pronouns, adjectives, and adverbs a costume designer uses to quickly define a character. My descriptors might be female, 41, middle class, white, intelligent, creative, focused, a University of Florida faculty member. Were I a fictional character, these descriptors, when coupled with my storyline, would form the basis of my character. And what is my storyline? Gives a TED Talk. Let's think of this another way. Most of us are familiar with the 2001 film Legally Blonde. The lead character, Elle Wood's storyline, taking place over a 2-year period and not a 15-minute TED Talk, is more complex. Elle is on a personal journey, although we don't know it at first. If we take Elle, when we first meet her, she is shallow, dumb, singularly focused, fashionable, popular, and girly. With these descriptors, a costume designer begins the process to design the clothing that will communicate who Elle is. The costume design process can be boiled down to research, sketching, rendering, and realization. At each step of the process, design choice intersects with character and audience. Does the choice say to you as an audience member what I need you to understand about the character? Have I created a visual shortcut to help you better understand Elle Woods, myself? As a designer, I am living character for months or even years in development. So how quickly can I communicate using clothing, accessories, and a hairstyle? And how quickly can you process the image in front of you to receive what I intend? Designers make seemingly innocuous choices to communicate quickly. A homeless character is a dirty man. An evil character is dressed in black, signifying evil. The maiden wears white, signifying purity. The presenter is professionally dressed, while the dumb blonde wears pink ruffles. But are these choices really innocuous? Have we presented complex characters or simply defaulted to a stereotype? But aren't the stereotypes the point? You partially understand Elle Woods to be a dumb blonde because she is wearing ruffly pink. The design process typically stops at the transmission and receipt of information. Have I, as a designer, sold you as a consumer? As designers and consumers, we have a responsibility to go further and consider the impact of an image. Living in the era of big data, social media, and uninterrupted global internet access, we are taking in more images today than ever before. Our brains are hardwired to process huge amounts of visual data. More than 80% of the information our brains process is visual. Our eyes can register a stunning 36,000 images per hour. Visuals communicate 60,000 times faster than text. We are also consuming more character today than ever before. Characters are created on every platform we engage in. From Instagram posts to produced series, visual messaging penetrates every facet of our lives. We have likely all seen the headlines linking Instagram and other social media platforms to reduced self-esteem in young girls. The linking of one's self-worth to the number of likes an obsessively filtered image receives has clear and damaging long-term consequences. But social media is simply exacerbating a problem deeply rooted in society. For years, a debate raged on about the damsel in distress trope prevalent in Disney movies and whether or not it harmed young girls' self-esteem. The uber-girly, male-dominated world of the Disney fairy tale directly parallels the world of Elle Woods. A simplified arc of Elle's story. Girl and boy date, girl gets rejected by boy, girl consumes boy's criticism, and obsessively seeks to prove him wrong and win him back. In the process, girl finds herself. We can watch Elle's clothing as a barometer for her self-perception, a perception deeply intertwined with society's stereotype. In assessing visual messaging, there is a clear disorientation between the authentic self and society's stereotype. The message that is actually clear is if I do not look like, dress like, then I cannot be, even if authentically I am. If Elle Woods does not look like, dress like a Harvard law student, then she cannot be a Harvard law student, even if authentically she is. I recently had a student come into my office expressing surprise at the over-sexualization of the female-presenting population in the entertainment industry. Admittedly, I was a bit taken aback by her surprise. When we look at American entertainment, female-presenting characters are almost always defined through the male gaze. It stands to reason that the very environment creating these characters would be gender biased as well. I know this to be true because I have experienced gender bias in nearly every professional environment I have entered. My first job, I was paid $10 less an hour than my male colleagues in parallel positions. Working a 40-hour work week, this is $19,200 a year. I won't get into how this expands when compounding interest in a retirement account. This reality stood in direct contrast to the self-worth built throughout my childhood. I grew up a child of the 80s and the 90s. My parents raised myself and my sister no differently than my two brothers. As a military family, we were taught and engaged in history, art, and culture as we traveled and lived throughout the United States and Europe. I was valued for my hard work, intelligence, dedication, and kindness. Gender simply did not enter the equation. With this solid understanding of who I was, I entered the professional world at 26, having completed a terminal degree. The question that would haunt me my entire career was not one of improving skills, expanding knowledge, or tackling a challenge. The question that would haunt me is, can my self-worth stand up to the gender-based inferior messaging I am receiving? 3 months after graduate school, I interviewed for a pattern maker position with Cirque du Soleil. I hadn't applied for the pattern maker position, I had applied for an entry-level position. But the project manager thought I was well qualified. At the conclusion of that interview, I told the project manager that I would still like to be considered for the entry-level job if there was someone better suited for the pattern maker position. I had advanced training and skills for this very position. So what was I thinking? I am underqualified. Surely there is someone better for this position. I am desperate for a position that utilizes my creative skills. Any position. I felt like an imposter, just as I feel like one now. As I prepared this talk, I asked myself, why would anyone listen to me? I chose my words, tone, and clothing to effectively portray an idea worth spreading. I understand the idea has value. I research and live it every day. You understand it has value because I am presenting it and myself in a way that sells it. My clothing gives me power. Wouldn't you agree? I have armored up to say to you that the self-worth we intrinsically possess is under attack by substantially well-designed images thrust upon us by society. As consumers, we must be wary of what we are taking in, and as designers, we must choose a more intentional process. Imposter syndrome can be defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's own successes are deserved or legitimately achieved. It most acutely impacts high-achieving individuals whose overwhelming sense of self-doubt leaves them questioning their own accomplishments and is disproportionately applied to women. It is clear how in a few short years, I went from a solid understanding of myself to an overwhelming sense of self-doubt. Culture, messaging, society. Who I was in direct conflict with who society told me to be. I was 26 and embarking on a career. I should have been 26, settling down, getting married, having children. The images of this life are everywhere. The images of my life, a self-assured, career-driven woman whose clothing, makeup, and hairstyle weren't commented on, edited, or filtered, nowhere. I would slowly come to terms with the reality that the commentary, defining, and fight to be valued for my actual contributions as opposed to my gender would be ongoing. This was 2006. Today, the proliferation of gender-based sexualized imaging in the wake of social media is staggering. So staggering that the concept of imposter syndrome is widely known, but its intersection with visual messaging is seldom discussed, much less analyzed. The analysis of visual messaging must fall to viewer and creator. If society is to progress and individuals become more rooted in authenticity, we must stop taking in images as a means of self-assessment. We must be allowed to be exactly who we are. What if we take in images that mirror the diverse humanity of our culture? What if companies utilize diverse and authentic women to sell products? Self-worth rises, profits increase. In 2004, Dove launched the Real Beauty campaign, utilizing diverse and authentic women. The strategy increased sales from $2 billion to $4 billion in 3 years. When companies align their values with social consciousness, messaging shifts and over time change occurs. How and if we, as designers, choose authentic representation and storytelling matters. Socially cognizant design calls for an interrogation of choice, an understanding of the power of that choice, and the social responsibility to utilize that power to affect change. Cultural norms must broaden to recognize the complex individual. Designers must approach design with nuance. In returning to the journey of Elle Woods, what if we look at Elle at the end of the production, self-assured, standing in her own power, and accomplished, and weave these descriptors with our Act 1 descriptors? Can we acknowledge that an individual can be so complex as to be self-assured and shallow in the same moment? Visual shortcuts are not necessary. Our brains can process more. Defaulting to stereotypes as designers is as lazy as it is harmful. In assessing visual messaging, consider 30% of the homeless population in America is families with children, not dirty men. Jadis, the white witch of Narnia, wears white. Maid Marian is often portrayed in red, and Elle Woods, as a self-assured woman in 2022, she can wear whatever she pleases. Thank you.